Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel that I do not post on enough. We are changing that today, right now. So I have a very important story that I want to share with y'all, and one that's become very important to me. Windyville hit my attention by accident. Every once in a while on TikTok, in between my normal story videos, I would make these silly just for fun videos where I would pick a random town on Google Maps and drop in there on Street View and just kind of look around and decide if I thought the town was haunted. And one day, in one of those videos, I dropped into Windyville, Missouri, which, by the way, I declared big haunted. And the comments on that video sent me down a rabbit hole that changed my life. It turned out that there was something big wrong in Windyville. And though it indeed had a long reputation for being haunted, it's not the ghosts I'm worried about. This story in Windyville began an entire series I've been doing on TikTok that is now known as the Ozarks series. But I originally started out calling it The Secret of Southern Missouri, not realizing at the time that what I was seeing was not a product of Missouri itself, but as the Ozarks as a whole. And I recently reached the realization that the secret of the Ozarks is just one of many secrets that overlaps to form the secret of this nation. And it is a terrible, dark secret of overlapping rings of drugs and prostitution and human trafficking and sex trafficking and a very real human meat market. I know now that what I've been tracking is really just part of a massive underground network that ties into corruption at the very highest level of our government down to the corrupted officials in the tiniest of rural towns. It's a puzzle with many missing pieces, and I'm still learning all the time. Who knows what this project may eventually evolve into, but for now, let's go back to where it all began. Windyville, Missouri is a tiny community. The center of it is not much more than a crossroads, and in 2020, the population was a whopping 54 people. Established back in 1921, the few families still here typically have deep roots here, and sometimes deep roots can hide deep secrets. One of those secrets was suddenly exposed in 2021 when the news broke about the horrific murder of 33-year-old Cassidy Rainwater. First, let's talk about Cassidy's background for a minute. But it is very important to me that we discuss any sensitive subjects regarding her and any other victim that may come up not with judgment, but with a sincere desire to understand. I know all too well how drugs and alcohol can change a person, but I also know that they are more than their addictions. And I want them all to be remembered for who they were and not just what they struggled with. So to make this very, very clear, I will tolerate no victim slander here. Cassidy was not given an easy life. There was a lot of instability in her early life, and some of her family members were already caught up in the same circles that she herself would eventually fall into. As an adult, she had several failed relationships, and she gave birth to 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. While she loved her children dearly, she was not always able to be the kind of mother that she wanted to be. She spent years struggling with addiction and went through periods of highs and lows, times where she was doing better and healing and getting her life together, only to fall off again and end up right back where she started. And like many people who experience substance abuse, she made bad decisions at times. While she was no angel, at her core, Cassidy had a good heart. The people that knew and loved her describe her as being full of life, friendly, fun, and outgoing with a spunky and feisty spirit. She was quick to laugh and quick to love. She loved to sing, and she often did, and she enjoyed writing poetry. And her favorite place was the river, where she could spend hours hunting for arrowheads. At some point prior to the summer of 2021, Cassidy had separated from her then husband, Zachary Paul, and she was living in Lebanon, Missouri, though she was largely homeless at the time. From what I understand, she was just kind of couch surfing and staying with various family and friends. I'm unsure of this fact, but I believe she often stayed with an aunt. And while it wasn't unusual for her to disappear for short periods of time, she would always return within a couple of weeks. I believe it was this aunt who became concerned when 6 weeks passed and she had not seen or heard from her and called the police. According to court documents, she was officially reported missing on August 25th, 2021. Chief Deputy Darren Cheek of the Dallas County Sheriff's Department took the report and was told that she had last been seen in the company of James Rainwater. He was later determined to be James Phelps of 386 Moon Valley Road in Lebanon, Missouri. Though this address is listed as being located in Lebanon, which is mostly Laclede County, his cabin actually sits on the Dallas County portion of Moon Valley and is located closer to Windyville. That same day, on August 25th, Deputy Chris Clark was dispatched to the property for a wellness check on Cassidy and reported that he was unable to locate any sign of her. Then, on September 1st, Sergeant Robbie Simmons was sent to the property, and he spoke to James Phelps, who told him Cassidy had been staying there for a few weeks while she got back on her feet, but that he had not seen her since July 25th, when she'd left in the middle of the night. She'd gotten into a car at the end of the long dirt driveway to the cabin. He didn't know what kind of car it was or who had picked her up, but he did mention that she'd been talking about going to Colorado. There was no sign of Cassidy until September 16th, when the FBI in Kansas City received an anonymous cyber tip of 7 photos labeled Cassidy. Some of these photos depicted a partially clothed female in a cage, who was immediately recognizable as Cassidy. The remaining photos depicted Cassidy's body bound to a gantry crane, a device commonly used for processing wild game, and then her evisceration and dismemberment. The FBI sent the photos to the Dallas County Sheriff's Office, who promptly dispatched Sergeant Simmons back to the cabin, where he confirmed the property to match the scene in the photos. At that time, James Phelps was arrested and transported to the Dallas County Detention Center. The affidavit then says that Sergeant Simmons secured the scene and contacted Chief Deputy Darren Cheek, who applied for the search warrant. Once the warrants for the property and electronic devices were obtained, the Dallas County Sheriff's Office, along with the assistance from the FBI and the Greene County Sheriff's Office Crime Scene Unit, executed the search warrants and investigators processed the crime scene. Reading this straight out of the affidavit. During the processing of the crime scene, physical evidence was located, including the gantry crane located behind the residence. Located inside the residence was potential blood evidence and items from the freezer that appeared to be human flesh, dated 7/24. These items were sent to the crime lab for testing, which the lab confirmed to be consistent with Cassidy's DNA. Skeletal remains believed to be Cassidy's were located on the adjacent property where Phelps had disposed of them. Investigators were able to locate digital evidence on electronic devices that were seized. The digital evidence was sent to the computer forensics lab to be analyzed, and while being analyzed, messages between James Phelps and Timothy Norton were uncovered, planning the murder of Cassidy on July 24th, 2021. Now, Phelps and Norton, Tim and Jim, were best friends. They were co-conspirators in every way. These men talked daily, and there was nothing in each other's lives that they didn't both know about. Both men also listed their address as the cabin in Moon Valley, though Phelps was the only primary resident that I'm aware of. Timothy Norton was a truck driver and is said to have often slept in his truck. He was actually on the road when Phelps was arrested, but when he returned to town on September 19th, he was also picked up. And while Phelps stayed quiet and invoked his right to an attorney, Norton started talking almost immediately. On September 20th, he confessed to Cassidy's murder. According to the affidavit, Norton told agents that Phelps asked Norton to come over while Cassidy was still sleeping. He stated that Phelps had asked her to sleep on the floor by the front door of the cabin, so they had easy access to attack her. Norton stated that he held her legs down while Phelps strangled her and placed a bag over her head. He stated that after Cassidy was deceased, he and Phelps took a short break before carrying her body outside. He stated that Phelps then bound her to the gantry crane, and Phelps began the evisceration and dismemberment of her body. Norton then helped carry Cassidy's dismembered body into the bathroom tub. Obviously, after that, Timothy Norton was also arrested. From the beginning, police were very tight-lipped about this case. And given the shocking nature of the crime, there was a surprising lack of media attention on it. There were no televised police updates, and little information was released on it. When updates were given, it was only released through the Sheriff's Department's Facebook page. And there were no official updates at all until November. But leaks quickly sprang up inside various county departments. Talk spread with growing horror. Terrible rumors of a girl locked in a cage, of dark web torture porn and cannibalism. And there was also disturbing talk of evidence of other victims. But this talk mostly stayed within the community until the night of October 4th, when the cabin at 386 Moon Valley, where Cassidy Rainwater lost her life, suddenly and mysteriously caught fire. Multiple agencies in the area responded to the fire, and not long after first responders arrived, the captain of one fire department found himself standing on a makeshift tripwire that was rigged to some type of explosives. The whole place had been booby-trapped. The bomb squad was called in. The line that the captain was standing on was disabled, but 2 of the devices had to be detonated in order to make the scene safe enough for first responders to fight the original structure fire. Only 2 weeks, 14 days after the arrests of Phelps and Norton, the crime scene burned to the ground, and all the remaining evidence went with it. And there was remaining evidence. It seems Missouri State Highway Patrol had filed for a new search warrant only days before and had not had a chance to execute it yet. And then it burned. The fire was ruled arson and was said to be under investigation, but locals claim the police never even looked into it. Neighbors were never questioned, and one resident of Moon Valley even offered their camera footage to the police, who showed no interest in it. The fire raised a lot of eyebrows, as it should. And it was the last straw for a community who was already anxious and on edge, and at this time, in early October, had yet to be told anything by officials. More and more news stations started picking the story up, followed by crime bloggers and YouTubers who were interviewing locals and questioning the sheriff's department. And the sheriff of Dallas County, good old Scott Rice, well, he didn't like that very much. On October 7th, he released a statement, on Facebook of course, that said, quote, "There is a lot of misinformation and rumors regarding the Cassidy Rainwater case being circulated across social media and various news platforms. While I understand the impatience and the curiosity of the people, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. It is not a good idea to listen to a crime reporter blogger or TikTok videos that is sitting in their apartments or their mommy and daddy's basement, eating great value cheese puff and drinking boxed wine with grand intentions of becoming a social media superstar. For real, these Cheetos are good. And then he says 99.99999% of what has been posted on social media is crap. Love, share, fries. And while that is funny, it's also not. Because the problem is, it wasn't crap. When the details of the crime were finally released, many of the rumors were confirmed to be true. Cassidy was held in a cage. She was dismembered. And meat from her body was found in the freezer. Locals were not pleased with the local police department. A Windyville woman was interviewed and stated that the way the case was handled was incredibly incompetent, and said that the fake news the sheriff's department posted about actually came from inside that department. She said, quote, "It was detectives who leaked everything in the beginning. Now that these so-called rumors turned out to be true, the community as a whole feels like we've been lied to. A lot of people are really upset." And let me tell you, I don't blame them for that. They should be upset. This was an upsetting crime, and it's upsetting when you can't trust your own police department. I've talked to many locals now. I've read hundreds, if not 1,000 emails. I've spent hours on the phone, and I've met some amazing people, good, honest people from this area who only want the truth and safety for their community. And most of them are all saying the same thing, that the information that was spread around, the rumors, all came from inside the police department. And since much of the leaked information later turned out to be true, I think it's safe to assume that the rest of the rumors at least have some basis of fact. And the more times I hear the same thing from different people, the more weight it holds in my eyes as well. Like the rumors that on September 16th, when Phelps was arrested, the police found him sitting at the kitchen table eating a sandwich containing meat from Cassidy's body. And that as he was being arrested, he laughed about selling unsuspecting neighbors her ribs. Now, I've heard a lot about Phelps and this meat. I've talked to people who remember seeing him selling barbecue at campgrounds near Bennett Springs and selling meat at a jerky stand in a farmer's market in Buffalo. It was also said, often said, I should say, that Phelps also sold meat through a cannibalism website on the dark web, where he went under the name The Butcher, and that the photos of Cassidy that had been sent to the FBI had been pulled off the dark web from that same website. It was also leaked that there was digital evidence not only of Cassidy but also of other victims, some of which indicated filmed sexual assault and torture. It was leaked that meat hooks were found in the bathroom in the cabin, and that there were packages of meat in the freezer marked with different dates. While this particular rumor has never been officially confirmed, I can tell you that that is true. I've heard it too many times from too many different people, some of which hold official positions inside Dallas and Laclede counties. And I was told by a deputy from a neighboring county that that freezer was full of meat. And a former Dallas County employee who was on the scene said, quote, "Everyone who worked that scene is going to need intense therapy," which says a lot coming from this field. It also widely circulated that numerous other partial remains were found on the property. I've heard numbers ranging from 13 to over 100. And there was also talk of refrigerated trucks that had been taken for evidence that somehow became lost. Originally, Phelps and Norton had only been charged with kidnapping. It wasn't until November 17th that the Dallas County prosecutor finally upgraded their charges to include first-degree murder and abandonment of a corpse. In April 2023, James Phelps entered an Alfred plea to his charges. From what I understand, an Alfred plea pretty much doesn't admit guilt, but acknowledges that there's enough evidence to convict. Phelps was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In June 2023, Timothy Norton pled guilty, and he also was sentenced to life without parole. Yet even after their sentencing, and to this day, authorities still not only refuse to acknowledge any link to cannibalism, they outright deny it. They also deny that there are other victims. The Dallas County Sheriff's Office still maintains, quote, "We have not located any evidence that would lead us to believe there are any other victims associated with Phelps and Norton at this time." And even today, in 2025, that is still their official story. But it is not the whole story. Not even close to it. Because not only was plenty of information leaked that says otherwise, there was evidence on scene that raised a lot of questions about other missing people. There are messages between Phelps and Norton discussing other victims. And even Norton himself revealed in his interrogation that he and Phelps looked for their other victims. Multiple victims. At Walmart and online, and stated that girls between the ages of 12 and 14 were of special interest to them. These statements were even brought up in court by the Dallas County prosecutor. I feel like any reasonable person can take one look at this case and realize that something ain't right here. It looks and it smells like a cover-up. And it didn't take much digging to realize that Cassidy's case connects to something much larger than just a couple of sickos who eat people. I'm now 6 months into this rabbit hole, and the connections are still constantly connecting. But the most striking connection, and one that I feel is very important, is that 14 years before Cassidy's disappearance, her mother, Tracy Wawasek, also went missing in Lebanon. Tracy disappeared on April 16th, 2007. Her case is also very strange and is still considered unsolved. Tracy, whose maiden name was Rainwater, was reported missing by her longtime boyfriend, Leonard, who told police that he thought she had gone looking for arrowheads. Much like her daughter, Tracy loved the river. A search was mounted for her around the property, down by the river, and in the fields across the street. According to one person heavily involved in the search, quote, "We searched and searched, grids laid meticulously, again and again, cadaver dogs, satellite imagery, and even on hands and knees for years." Yet Tracy's bones were found a year later, scattered in a field that had already been searched several times. It was reported that, quote, "because of the conditions of the remains, it could be hard to determine how the woman died." Even then, not all of her bones had been found. Tracy's skull was still missing. It was not found until September 27th, 2016. And when it was found out in the open, in a field, sitting under a bush within walking distance of where she disappeared. It doesn't make any sense. Still today, what happened to Tracy remains a mystery. No cause of death was ever released, and no arrests were ever made. And much like in Cassidy's case, the Laclede County Sheriff's Department was pretty tight-lipped about Tracy as well. I was only able to find 2 short articles and an odd update posted by KSPR News on August 26th, 2009, 2 years after her disappearance. The Laclede County Sheriff says a death investigation is now being used for political mudslinging. Last May, Tracy Wawasek's bones were found scattered by animals and rising water near the river next to her boyfriend's home. Sheriff Richard Wrinkle says anthropologists never found any trauma on the bones investigators did find. He says unfound bones and unanswered questions are causing accusations. I never did find out exactly what political mudslinging this statement was referring to, but this post about Tracy is eerily reminiscent of the defensive Cheetos and boxed wine post made by the Dallas County Sheriff about her daughter's case. I do know, however, that the unfound bones that he was referring to is in fact Tracy's skull. For some reason, her skull has always been a big deal in this case. There were a lot of rumors and speculation surrounding it, and I was told by one investigator, quote, "The skull was a thorn in our side for the longest time. There was always this connotation that it was the key to all of this. And then it just appeared under a bush in a place there is no way that it could have always been. And unfortunately, even when it was discovered, it didn't unlock any secrets. There were no notable injuries on it. No bite marks, bullet holes, or markings of any kind. And while the sheriff at the time, Sheriff Wrinkle, pushed the narrative that the skull had been carried away by animals, the investigators that found it say they don't believe that's possible. There are a lot of mysteries here and a lot of unexplained events in a relatively small area. And almost all of them share some kind of underlying connection right beneath the surface. For instance, it may appear that there is not a common link between Tracy's disappearance and her daughter's 14 years later. And while what happened to them is not the same, there is actually a common link, because I have on good authority that one of the men that was either there the night Tracy disappeared or was one of the people who volunteered in her initial search was none other than a man that we shall call John. And John is a very important player in the story. See, he owned the property and the cabin that James Phelps lived in. Oh, and that adjacent property to the cabin where Cassidy's bones had been found scattered, it was owned by Bill Rainwater, Tracy's father and Cassidy's grandfather. This is a very tangled web with many interwoven threads. So in the next video, we're going to do some deep dives on the background and the connections between the main people that we will continue to see in the series. So I do hope you'll tune in for that. And if you'd like to see me again, please like and subscribe. Thank you so much to everyone who has already subscribed, and I will see y'all next time.